All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week. As promised, we're going to hit a bunch of games from the Olympic men's basketball tournament today. We're going to start with Team USA getting a much more convincing victory against South Sudan this time around. We're going to break down the starting lineup change as well as some other details from that game. After that, I want to hit what I thought was the most entertaining game from yesterday as Japan almost upsets France as France comes back to beat them in overtime on the strength of a 4-point play at the end of regulation, and then some big-time playmaking from Victor Wembanyama in overtime. And then at the very end of the show, we're going to briefly talk about Canada versus Australia, some of the shot creation data coming from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and then Josh Giddey having an impressive performance in international play. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. Don't forget it's really helpful if you guys leave a rating and a review on the podcast feed. And last but not least, keep dropping mailbag questions in the YouTube comments. We're probably going to hit a mailbag towards the tail end of this week. All right, let's talk some basketball. So starting lineup shift as Anthony Davis, as I've been begging for forever, comes into the starting lineup for Joel Embiid, and then Jason Tatum into the starting lineup for Jrue Holiday. They immediately got off to a much better defensive start. We're going to talk about the specifics of those substitutions here in just a minute. The main story of this game, I thought, was Team USA just brought a much better defensive effort. South Sudan, I know a lot of people, just because they don't have the reputation in FIBA that some of these other countries that we've seen over the years have great success, like Spain and Argentina, right? Like these teams that we've just seen over the years give USA bigger fights and stuff like that. Like South Sudan may not have the history of those teams, but what they do have is probably the most athletic roster out of any of the FIBA teams. They've just got a bunch of guys who are really mobile with really long wingspans that can cover ground, that can pressure the ball. You see how they continue even in the convincing win for USA to force a lot of turnovers and to catch guys not paying attention and to close gaps just a little bit faster than guys are expecting. And just by fielding a team that has not just a ton of athleticism, but that team's athletic by NBA standards. That's a very, very athletic team, and that can be a little bit of an issue to deal with, especially against USA's typical starting lineup. As far as the AD for Joel Embiid substitution, going above and beyond the simple fact that AD's just been a better player than Joel Embiid in terms of this Team USA context, it's also a really tough matchup for Embiid against that type of foot speed. Again, one of the big reasons why Sudan had a lot of success against Team USA in their matchup in the exhibition games is just getting up and down the floor and catching guys just not keeping up in that pace. In addition to that, Sudan likes to shoot a lot of threes, and so it's important to close out and to make rotations and all these very important details on defense that specifically depend on foot speed. And so just going with Anthony Davis, even a guy like Jason Tatum in for Jrue, even though Drew's probably a little quicker of foot, Tatum just brings more length, meaning more ground coverage. And so even though Tatum still had a little bit of a struggle offensively in this game, and the big thing with Tatum is the jump shot is still just way off the reservation. He got a wide open catch and shoot three in the right corner to start this game. Literally hit the side of the backboard. And I pulled the numbers per synergy. Tatum is 0 for 11 on jump shots with Team USA in the 6 games that he's played in, including the exhibition. So like he's just in a really tough space right now in terms of his confidence in his jumper. And this is on the heels of a playoff run where he took 188 jump shots for only 151 points. That's just 0.8 points per shot. So Tatum is just in this extended slump for whatever reason. To me, it seems to be mostly mechanical. I talk a lot about energy transfer. Like energy transfer is getting that power from your feet up through your release. We think of jump shooting as like a reach into the cookie jar type of thing in terms of your release, but that's just one small part of it. It is a process that begins with your feet. And that extends. There's a middle portion. If it begins with your feet and it ends with your release, in the middle, there's the gather. And in the gather, Tatum has hitches in it, like multiple hitches where the ball stops moving. What you want to see when a player is catching and shooting, you want to see the ball just kind of go from the catch up to the release in a fluid motion, because if that momentum stops, then any sort of, so for instance, like if you've got good legs on the shot and you get your lift and your base, but then you have a hitch in the middle, you lose that power that you generate from the base. And then you're trying to make up for it at the end by slinging it with your release, and that's just a lot more difficult to maintain in terms of muscle memory. If you get good footwork into a good base, into good lift, into a clean gather, and have smooth transfer of energy, then by the end, your hands are basically just guiding the basketball. Any of you guys who have shot at a high level, you guys know that it's like one of those things where when you get your lift, when you get your legs underneath you, the shot's easy. The shot is the easiest part of it. The hardest part is in a movement situation, getting your base. In an off-the-dribble situation, getting your base. Making sure you get a clean gather. That's where the work of the shot is done. The release is the easy part. And so right now, Tatum's just in a little bit of a working. He's kind of working on his form and trying to figure out what's going on. And the good news is they won the title despite the fact that he was having those struggles. And so that should go a long way towards some optimism for Celtics fans, because if Tatum can get his jump shot back next season, then the whole league could be in some serious trouble. Because when Jason Tatum is an elite jump shooter, that's when he enters into that like 5-6 area of player rankings. When he's not shooting the ball, that's when he dips down into that like 8, 9, 10 area in player rankings. It's kind of a very important part of his game, especially with how often he settles for jump shots. On a couple other guys I wanted to shout out, but again, I want to just point out before we get into individual shout outs, this was just a much better defensive game. They gave up 100 points to South Sudan last time. And one of their weaknesses is they don't have a ton of ball handling. They have got a lot of guys who can shoot. They have a couple of core ball handlers, but their front court guys don't handle the ball or see the floor super well. And so if you actually defend, you can get them to make mistakes. You can get them to take tough shots. You can get them to miss. They did a much, much better job of that tonight. I think they held them to 86 points, if I remember correctly, something around that area. Much, much more impressive defensive effort for USA. Bam Adebayo, 8 for 10 for 18 points. Also had 2 blocks. Some good switching too onto South Sudan's guards. I thought the 2 corner threes he hit in the first half were massively important. South Sudan kind of went down to a substantial deficit in the late first quarter against the Team USA bench group, and the Team USA bench group was much better than the starting group today in spite of this starting lineup change, in large part because Steph Curry had a really rough game, and I thought LeBron, even though his box score looked fine, I thought LeBron had one of his rougher games with Team USA so far, mainly just in the sense that he settled for a couple jump shots that he missed. And he also had a lot of turnovers that were live ball turnovers that led to fast break opportunities for South Sudan. So like the starters between Tatum obviously still being in an offensive funk and LeBron and Steph just having a rough game, they weren't as impressive. But that bench group they just handled South Sudan today. That Bam, a KD front line is as good as Bam was defensively. I want to shout out Kevin Durant as well. Some timely shot making from Anthony Edwards. I thought Derek White had a big game. He had 3 steals as well as 3 made 3-point shots. Continues to just kind of be in the right spot and do the right thing, make extra effort plays. Really, really impressive stuff there. The Steph struggles, to me, really, like, and we saw this towards the tail end of last season, teams that have a lot of speed and length, especially on the perimeter, they just close in those gaps that Steph is usually accustomed to working with. And again, like, this is not just an athletic team. This is an athletic team by NBA standards. And so I think that kind of foretells some of the struggles that Steph's going to have in these matchups. We talked about it last year at the end of the year. It's like they play the Kings. I kind of feel like Steph's going to struggle. They play the Pelicans. I kind of feel like Steph's going to struggle. Teams that have like really quick athletic guards with good length that can kind of bother him on the perimeter are going to give him some issues, and that's just been the case. As far as the Joel Embiid thing goes, like I talked about, it was just a matchup. It's hard for him to cover ground in transition and in rotation against this team. Played against Serbia. My guess is he'll play against Puerto Rico as well. Thought he handled it as well as you could. Obviously, if you're a recent MVP of the NBA, you're going to be a little frustrated to be benched in a game like this, but I thought it was the right decision. Overall, so far through 2 pool play games for USA, really impressed by them. Average margin of victory over 20. And against these quality of teams, that's super impressive. I know people don't think much of South Sudan, but they're a very good team. Serbia has the best team, or best player in the world, and they should continue that dominance against Puerto Rico. And I actually figured there'd be more close games to this point, but Team USA's held up really strong. The defense has been super impressive. Even their lesser defenders, or guys that don't have a reputation of being committed to defense, have been defending really well. Team USA looking really good so far through 2 games. You know the beautiful thing about being a sports fan? There's only 2 days the whole year without a game. 2. With so much happening and so much action, that makes just about every day game day at DraftKings Sportsbook. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your team, and place your first bet. It really couldn't be any easier or any simpler. Baseball, golf, UFC, there's something for every fan of every sport to bet on DraftKings. And I know it's early, but football season will be here before you know it. And the Kansas City Chiefs are currently the favorite to win the Super Bowl on DraftKings at plus 550. And if you're new to DraftKings, you got to check this out. New customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Whatever your vibe, it's a Camry vibe. That's the reason the Toyota Camry has been America's best-selling sedan for the past 22 years. And the all-new Camry takes it to a new level. It comes equipped with a standard 225 horsepower engine and available sport-tuned suspension, providing power, speed, and agility. Think of the Camry as your typical swingman. And it's a good-looking car, too. The Camry racing on the 2025 NASCAR circuit was based on the racing-inspired design of the all-new Camry, with available features including two-tone midnight black metallic roof and rear spoiler and 19-inch alloy wheels. The interior is just as fly. The Camry has a modern interior design with available features like a leather-trimmed steering wheel and multi-stage heated and ventilated front seats. We're talking fundamentals and flash. You don't see that combo often on the court or on the road. And because every all-new Camry is a hybrid, it has awesome fuel efficiency with up to an EPA estimated 51 miles per gallon combined. Whatever your vibe, it's a Camry vibe. Learn more at toyota.com/Camry. Moving on to Japan versus France. So France makes a bunch of huge plays late. Japan keeps it close. And Evan Fournier hits a really tough step back 3 at the top of the key. Got great separation, great lift, great arc. Just came perfectly through the net, tied the game. Matthew Strazel had a 4-point play on the left wing. It was a call I didn't necessarily agree with because the hand was kind of on the hip. Yuki Kawamura, the guard from Japan, did a wonderful job in this particular game orchestrating offense, especially after Rui Hachimura got ejected. But I thought he got tail end of a really tough call there on that left wing. Again, by the book, technically hand on the hip. It's by the book, it's a foul. But there's a huge difference between having the hand on the hip and pushing on the hip. And that's one of those incidental contact things that I think needs to be let go, especially in such a big moment. And again, if France beats you because he makes that shot and then you foul and he makes 1 out of 2 free throws and then he goes down to the other end and they hit another 3 and they win, fine, tip the cap. Congrats to France. They beat you. That's really tough to be up 4 points like that in that situation and to lose on a call like that was not a fan. But Victor Wembanyama took over in overtime. There's a little post up on the right block. I can't remember exactly who was guarding him, but they tried to front the post. And when they fronted the post, Wemby just immediately spun off of it. Pass was perfect to the high point. On the catch, he had his back turned to the basket. He spun again and went right up and laid it up and the foul. A super, super coordinated play. Really, really impressive stuff. Really impressive stuff there from Victor Wembanyama. And then he missed a 3 on the right wing, but an offensive rebound. He got another clean look from the top of the key, knocked it down. Big time play from Victor Wembanyama. The guard play from France is really where the issue is. It's when you look at Canada and France in particular. Canada has this incredible perimeter core, but their front line is just too small to really contend with some of the bigger front lines here in FIBA. And then you go and you look at France, and they have this incredible front line. I mean, even Guerschon Yabusele had an incredible game in this one, hit a bunch of tough mid-range jump shots, was competing, was flying around. And they have that front court presence, but they Evan Fournier and Frank Ntilikina, it's not enough. in terms of shot creation. Matthew Strzezel had a little stretch there in the second half where he was spamming ball screens with Gobert and coming off clean on the right wing and getting some decent looks, and he hit a couple of pull-up jump shots there, but they just struggle in terms of that guard play. Victor Wembanyama, one of the most impressive things that I noticed about France in the two games is they're running a lot of like kind of weird, funky, like big man ball screens. Where they will have like Wemby at the elbow. Like imagine like the left elbow, so like where the free throw line extended kind of out to where the edge of the key is. And he'll catch there, and then Gobert will come out of a triple, like Wemby will be in a triple threat, and Gobert will come and set a screen, but what he'll do is he'll deliberately screen the backside of the defender. And what they're trying to do there is most teams are going to switch a 4-5 pick and roll. What that means is the power forward and the center in a two-man game together. The reason why they're going to switch that is because likely those two defenders are similar in size. And if those two defenders are similar in size, rather than allowing Wemby to come off clean as the guy's in trail position, in which case now Wemby's just going to go right to the rim. If you just switch it, it effectively like shuts the action down, right? But this is where high-low basketball comes into play. High-low basketball is when you have one of your big guys operating around the foul line while another one of your big guys is underneath the basket trying to obtain good post position because that center can throw good over-the-top passes from that foul line area. So what they were doing, which I thought was really smart, and they did this with Gobert, but they also did it with Yabusele and some of their other bench forwards as well. But they would have Wemby start with the ball, and as Gobert would screen, he would deliberately screen the backside of the defender. And the reason why that's important is then as Wemby comes off into the switch, when he comes off into the switch, the screener's defender is now on Wemby squared up. But Gobert now has inside position. He has inside position because he screened that backside. Then he can quick turn and seal, and Wemby can throw that over the top pass, and there's an automatic angle kind of baked into the set because of the screening angle you take on the backside there. They got a bunch of good stuff out of that. I thought Wemby passed out of it extremely well. And so far through two Olympic games, Victor Wembanyama 1.17 points per shot on jump shots, which is really impressive. So great start to the Olympics for Wemby. On the Japan side of things, really was impressed by the overall ball and player movement. Some beautiful stuff in 5-out, really smart cutting. Guys like I cut a couple examples in my film session today and put them on my Twitter feed at _ Jason LT. But remember when I talked about in the show on Monday, the concept of like off-ball cutting specifically out of the wing and how that can, when you're running a ball screen on one side, how a cut on the weak side can cause confusion for off-ball defenders that are trying to sink into the paint, and it's hard to track man and ball in those situations. They got good looks out of that. Their guards were quick to come off of multiple actions. There was ball reversal. The ball was popping around. They'd have Rui as like their kind of go-to like on an island scorer when they needed him. But everything else was really smart 5-out ball and player movement. And that blender did a lot of damage to a French team that's got really good defenders between Frank Ntilikina and Nick Batum and Victor Wembanyama and Rudy Gobert. This is a very long and athletic defensive team that Japan was getting a lot of really good shots against. And it's just a wonderful example of the concepts that I talk about a lot on this show, in the sense that you can generate offense with ball and player movement and good schematic approach to help bolster personnel limitations. Rui Hachimura, really impressive offensive game. The face-up stuff, the footwork in the post, he was going right around good defenders and getting into the lane and finishing in traffic. The jump shot looks great. He's elevating. He's getting great rotation on it. He's knocking it down. The one thing, and I put a little thread of about 5 clips together you can find on my Twitter feed, but Rui is really struggling on defense with Japan, specifically off the ball tracking shooters. And remember, this was the specific issue that he ran into in the playoffs against Denver when he was tracking Michael Porter Jr. He had a couple of massive mistakes on that end, including one in Game 5 that might have cost them the game, where in a semi-transition set, he just wasn't paying attention and he lost Michael Porter Jr. for 3. Huge moment that the Lakers had a chance to send that thing back to LA for Game 6. And Rui's just attention to detail in those situations just has to get better. It's tracking through screens. It's the relaxation as soon as his man gives up the ball. He gave up 2 threes to Evan Fournier where he got switched onto Fournier. But then as soon as Fournier gave up the basketball, Fournier just cut to a different spot on the three-point line, and Rui wasn't paying attention, and Fournier got clean looks from 3. And so in order for Rui to be the type of player that the Lakers need him to be, those are things that he has to sharpen up. Shout out to Yui Kawamura, the quickness and pull-up shooting he showed, especially to try to close out that game after Rui Hachimura got ejected on that second unsportsmanlike foul on Rudy Gobert. I had so much fun watching him in this game. He was an absolute warrior, kept his team in it. I think he had like 28, 29 points. Super, super fun game. And then one last guy I wanted to shout out, Hugh Watanabe. I'm assuming related to Yuta Watanabe. But he had 2 huge blocks, including this one in regulation where he came down from the left wing when Rudy Gobert had a deep catch. And Rudy Gobert loaded up for his 2-hand slam, and he comes flying in and just barely gets a piece of it at the end. Ends up being a huge play that gave Japan a really good chance to win this game. And it's such a great example of what I talked about after Kevin Durant got dunked on by Anthony Edwards, which is, guys, getting dunked on is a sign of being a great defender. That's something that that's a commitment that you have to make. You have to be willing to risk what could happen if you get dunked on in order to bring that next level of rim protection. Had another big weak side block in the overtime period as well. But alas, Victor Wembanyama made the 2 big plays in OT, and they got out of there. All right, let's move on to Canada, Australia real quick before we get out of here. So Shai Gilgeous-Alexander picked up 2 quick early fouls, and there's only 5 fouls in FIBA, so he had to sit for a little bit. That allowed Australia to take a little bit of an early advantage. But in the early fourth quarter, Canada ends up pulling away. Dylan Brooks made a couple of plays, a little triple threat ball screen out of the right corner, where I believe I can't remember who it was, the big man for Canada. I'm blanking on his name now. But he slipped the ball screen. Dylan hit him perfect. He got a layup. And then he hit a little mid-range jump shot. And then right after that, Jamal Murray made a couple of plays. A nice little closeout attack to get RJ Barrett a wide open 3 in the corner. And then kind of like one of those classic Jamal Murray ISO pull-up jump shots around the foul line. All of a sudden like that, Canada was up by 11 and the game was over. I wanted to talk a little bit about the shot creation data for Shai, Jamal, and then Josh Giddey. So Shai has been brilliant so far in Olympics play. He's run 25 ISOs for 36 points, including passes. That's 1.44 points per possession. And he's personally, on his own shot attempts out of ISO, shooting 7 for 12. So Shai's locked in, looks fantastic. 41 total ISOs, post-ups, and ball screens in Olympic play for 56 points. That's 1.37 points per possession. Really impressive stuff from Shai. Jamal Murray made some big plays in this particular game like we talked about earlier, but shooting just 2 for 10 on jump shots so far in Olympic play. And I'm wondering if he's still a little banged up. I was talking to some of my Nuggets guys, and the word on him is that he's just not in shape. And if that's the thing, if Jamal's just not in shape, that's kind of disappointing because that's becoming kind of a reputation for him, that he's showing up into season and playing his way into shape. And like one of the things is like that sort of thing can lead to injuries when you're trying to play your way into shape, when you're playing with more weight, when you're playing super intense games, when your body's not prepared for it. So that obviously was a little bit concerning. Josh Giddey, though, really impressive so far for Australia. 34 pick and rolls, ISOs, and post-ups for 39 points. That's 1.15 points per possession. He's big. He's handling the basketball well. He's really good at protecting the basketball, really good with like behind the back dribbles and then using his shoulders to protect. He can make all the reads. Deadly with his floater. He's 5 for 7 so far in the Olympics on floaters. That's 71%. And then what he'll do a lot of times in switches when he sees a small guard in front of him, he'll just hit a hard dribble move like into their chest and then just gather right around 10 feet and rise up over the top of him and go to his little floater. Canada was doing some switching against him in this game, and he ended up beating it with a step back 3 as well as a driving floater against Jamal Murray. Really impressive shot making from Josh Giddey. I'm curious to see how it translates to the NBA level in a bigger role with Chicago next year. Last thing before we get out of here, is Canada a threat? Like I mentioned earlier, as good as they are on the perimeter, they're just not big enough on the inside. And one of the specific changes with FIBA that's been a challenge for USA is the defensive 3-second rule, and the idea that you can park a center underneath the basket and kind of gum things up and force them to rely on perimeter jump shooting, where USA can go cold sometimes, although I think Kevin Durant fixes that problem. With that being the case, Canada just doesn't have the interior size, even if they do park guys under the basket, to bother the bigger American athletes as they're going downhill. And so as good as Canada is on the perimeter, I just don't think they're big enough underneath the basket to make any sort of real problem for USA. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. We're going a little quick because I'm just about to hop on a call with Colin Cowherd, and we're going to hit a bunch of Team USA topics. So keep an eye on the Colin Cowherd podcast feed to see that in the coming days. And then we're not going to cover Puerto Rico versus USA this weekend. In all likelihood, we'll be doing a mailbag on Friday, in addition to probably covering 1 or 2 more FIBA games in that show. As always, I appreciate you guys for supporting the show, and I will see you guys then.